welcome to the basement. As you can tell by the logo that's to my left and your right, we're talking anime. Particularly, we're talking about episode 21 of Blue Sea, titled Goodbye, No Way, Separation with Tears? I don't know why they put the question mark in there as well, but it is what it is. The original air date for this episode was February 22nd, 1995, with its English air date being January 15th in the year 2000. This episode does what it sets out to do. With this being episode 21, there are 5 episodes left after this, and basically it was to firmly establish that this is the start of the final chapter, the final leg of the story. And one way it establishes that is right off the back with something that has not been seen in any of the previous episodes, at least not since the second episode of the series, where you get a recap of events. Basically, all the recent events regarding these giant roots emerging all over Japan, the seriousness of what Murakumo and Katie are planning as it relates to Susanna O, and not wiping out Japan and taking over the world afterwards. We get a great summary of events. In case anyone was just tuning in, apparently to see the final story arc, is just to remind, it just drives home the point that the end of the series is coming and that the final battle is going to be truly badass. So with that said, this episode did a lot of major things happened in this episode. One big one is that, at least this is how it came across to me, is that the entire plan that the Aragami, Murakumo, and Susanoo are doing, this is all Katie's idea. Katie is obviously the Kusanagi, as is Momiji. They're twin sisters. And apparently, Katie was dropped on her head at some point in time, because the idea of being the Kusanagi is that you're Japan's protector. And apparently, she's gone a little bit local and figures and declares that Japan is not worthy of her protection, at least not with humanity around, because she can't control it. What she can control? Plants. She can deal with plants. She can't deal with people. Now, yes, Blue Sea has this environmental message of subtext that's definitely been laid out quite a bit over the past several episodes that I've gone over. So I'm not shocked that this is, the entire solution for KDD to protect Japan is to turn everyone into a freaking plant. I'm not shocked by that. I'm just shocked at the fact that she can actually justify it, and that, oh, the modern technological age is just it's an attack on my senses, and that the only way Japan can be worthy of my protection is if everyone was a freaking dandelion. Yeah, that stretch of logic aside, I mean, she is in her own way right as it relates to environmental protection, and that there has to be a balance between what humanity does and Mother Nature. She is right in that regard. However, her plan and everything associated with it, cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. And she's basically called that by Momiji when Momiji finds out about it, and because Momiji actually likes the people and everything, and Momiji doesn't have a problem with any plants or anything of that nature. But the fact that her sister is willing to do such a thing, it really goes to show how different these two characters are. Is that Katie has, matter of fact, that's something else here. Katie has no heart. Considering one thing that Momiji brings forward is that Katie's basically has turned her back on Kusanagi, and Kusanagi was there always to protect her. And Katie barely reacts at all. So again, that goes to show this, that whatever Katie has over Momiji in terms of beauty, smarts, and everything else, the one thing Katie doesn't have She doesn't have heart. Momiji has that. And that's very telling when when Momiji confronts her about her plan. But unfortunately, it's a little bit too little, too late in that regard, because they were looking for this thing called the Owatu. It's the cave of the sun god, and it turned out it was actually on the property where Momiji's family lives, and that's where Katie and Susanna O were going, and that also was part of another confrontation in this episode between Katie, Mr. Kunakita, and Katie and Momiji's mother, who was the previous Kushinada. Uh, um, Mrs. The mother spills her own blood to use whatever power she still has left to try and create a protection barrier to keep Katie away from the Owatu. Not successful. Mr. Kunakita draws his gun to consider shooting her down. He can't bring himself to do it because he raised her as if she was his own daughter. So again, it's things that I'm not sure if he did fire, if it would have really been successful, but at least he would have made the attempt. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. And again, I can't blame him. It's a tough situation there. And you see that a lot with a lot of dramas where you can't bring yourself to do something that even though it's for the greater good. And so that leads me to go back to talking about Momiji. Momiji's powers are emerging with her Matama. We know she has flight capability, and telepathy, and she's able to use those in connection with Kusanagi. In this episode, her telepathy powers are expanded where she was able to communicate directly with both Katie and Murakumo over a vast distance, as well as Kusanagi. And when she senses that Kusanagi is being killed, she goes total Super Saiyan. The blue aura around her, and she bursts out flying to where he is about to be put 6 feet under by Murakumo. Yeah, and I was saving this for the very end. I'll talk about that in a bit. But the fact that Momiji has some these powers emerging, and she has a Matama of her own, in my opinion, definitely establishes something else that appears that Murakumo and Katie were rather annoyed, that Momiji was having these abilities, indicating that they may not have accounted for her, and that she may have some hidden powers, hidden talents that are starting to emerge as the crisis, intensifies. And so the final topic of discussion here is Kusanagi, as indicated that Kusanagi is killed by Murakumo. They actually battle throughout this entire episode. It's a long battle, and as indicated in previous episodes when these two went head to head, Kusanagi is not in Murakumo's league. Kusanagi only has 7 Matama, Murakumo has 8. And the 8th one gives him that ability of flight, gives him the air, gives him literally the high ground. However, Kusanagi, through their various encounters, has obviously been learning how to compensate, and he actually draws blood on Murakumo, slicing him across the face. In a stunning moment there. And when I saw that, that was clearly a telltale sign that Kusanagi was going to end up getting killed. Sure, it was telegraphed in its own way, but I think it was rather telling that if they were on an even playing field, Kusanagi versus Murakumo would be no contest because Kusanagi would whoop Murakumo's ass 7 ways from Sunday. So, and I thought the death scene where Kusanagi tries to shatter this giant mirror that was going to reflect some sunlight, and that Murakumo comes up behind him and jabs him in the back with that blade that comes out of his forearm, was graphic in its own way, but perfectly sequenced. And then there's a shot of Kusanagi falling a great distance as Katie is flying in, just happening to see it. And the closing shot of this episode is her kneeling in this lake, calling out for Kusanagi, but he's gone, he's dead. So Momiji is actually alone now. Sure, she has her friends at the TAC, but that connection with Kusanagi is very, very important to her, as indicated in the previous episode, and with with everything that's happening and that's happening in this episode, Katie's going to need. Excuse me, Katie. Momiji is going to need that support now more than ever from her friends at the TAC. So on that note, and my flubs on getting characters confused aside, we'll wrap this up here. Uh, since we got 5 episodes left, I am going to continue to do Talking Anime twice a week. We'll come back to talk about episode 22, Sadness, Fate, Momiji Kushinada, on Sunday. I intend to do that before the Royal Rumble. So it'll probably be very early Sunday, like maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, or more logically probably at 10 or 11 a.m. That's what I'm going to shoot for. But again, we'll come back and go over episode 22 on Sunday. That's the plan. Between now and then, obviously, we got Saturday. And the big thing is we'll be doing a recap and a reaction review of sorts for NXT TakeOver San Antonio, which is, of course, being headlined by Shinsuke Nakamura and Bobby Roode, as well as a fatal four-way for the NXT Women's Championship. Asuka defending against Nikki Cross, Billie Kay, and Peyton Royce. We'll talk about that. We'll start recording my thoughts on that as soon as that event ends. So, my friends, and you are my friends, be kind. Please subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.